Welcome into K-State Online. I am Mason Voth. That is KSU_fan, and this will be your KSO Sunday show today. Look, we wanted to talk a little bit more football ahead of the Rate Bowl. DY and I will certainly have that coming later this week, and we'll see how we get Drew and Fan and their perspective on it. But it was such a disastrous week in K-State basketball that there's really only one way that we can spin this thing right now. And it might be the last time that anybody out there seriously cares about K-State basketball this season. And that would maybe, a couple of weeks ago sound like hyperbole, but it's the truth at this point because you can see how this thing is going. You can see how this cast of characters resonates with the fan base, and it's clearly not very good right now. And it's tough to believe that anybody is going to have too much interest in this team in conference play where they'd really have to do something special, I think, to earn a lot of the fans back this season. It may not be a long-term thing, but it's certainly trending that way. But certainly for this year, all hope seems lost. I mean, I wrote a story about it last week. The most losses for an at-large bid in NCAA tournament history is 14. It's been pretty hard capped at that. That means K-State is going to have to lose no more than 9 games the rest of the way, and that includes 20 games in Big 12 play, and then, a guaranteed loss in the Big 12 tournament because we've never seen K-State win it. So there's a lot in front of K-State, but before they even think about the NCAA tournament or anything like that, they have to figure out how to beat a bunch of mid-major teams that they haven't been able to do this year. So, Fan, you're typically the most optimistic out of all of us, or the nicer, the friendlier one with your perspective here, because you understand how difficult this is. You've seen some darker times than I have throughout K-State athletics in your life. What is your perspective on what this basketball team is doing right now?
Well, the non-conference has been unmitigated disaster as far as how it could have gone. Only could be worse if you lose maybe to George Washington or something. Like you've played currently in Ken Palm, it's the number 192 strength of schedule for non-conference in the country, and you go 6-5. And you play only one team inside the top 50 in Ken Palm. 4 of those losses are to top 100 Ken Palm teams. And then Wichita State moved up to 107, moved up 6 or 7 spots after that win for tonight. K-State dropped almost 18 or 19 spots in Ken Palm to 91. So you have that factor. You haven't beat a top 100 team in Ken Palm for the first time in a long time. K-State had a few seasons where they did not beat a Ken Palm top 100 team. It's mostly because they didn't play any. Like in 2006, they were 9-2 in the non-conference with no top 100 wins. In '98, they were 9-1 with no top 100 wins. But they've had some bad teams. Even Bruce's teams in 2020 beat 2 top 100 Ken Palm teams. In 22. The only top 100 Ken Palm win was Wichita State, so not much better, but still you're looking at just a bad non-conference. And you just look at bad losses to teams ranked outside the top 100 in Ken Palm. This is the worst one since 2015 when number 155 Texas Tech beat us 64-47 in Lubbock. So the worst loss in nearly 10 years to a top 100 or a team ranked outside the top 100 in Ken Palm. So there's just a lot of bad as we look at this season.
Yeah, there are so many ways to go with it. And you think about how this team has kind of played throughout the start of the season. And then you thought, okay, losses happen. The LSU game, whatever, the one to Liberty, you still thought, okay, maybe this team can turn it around. And it's weird because then they go on the road to St. John's and they're up by 4 at halftime. And even though they didn't play their best, they were up by 4. And with that result, you're thinking, I liked what I saw there. And then you think about same situation plays out here tonight. K-State's up 4 at the half. They probably had no business doing it. They played terrible. They end on a 15-4 run, and pretty early on that thing was knocked out. And then with about 6 minutes to go, Wichita State just turned this into a full-blown ass beating on K-State. Now, I asked Jerome Tang about this after the game. In the span of, well, it's about 3 weeks, but 3 games, how surprised are you that one team could blow identical 4-point leads against St. John's and Wichita State, and both times end up losing by almost 20 points, all basically because of what they did wrong in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to defenses that just in both games, I thought the defense just caved. It just collapsed, and K-State had no answer. Wichita State was the aggressor. They were really the aggressor the whole game. K-State managed it better in the first half, but Wichita State was attacking. Wichita State shot 10 threes in the entire game and shot 22 free throws. K-State shot 32 threes and shot 15 free throws and only made 6 of them. Free throw percentage, 40% obviously is awful. Wichita State shot 91%, but this is a game that, to me, highlights the value of free throw rate. Wichita State with the free throw rate of 37%, K-State with 22%, and the ability to score in the paint. Wichita State outscored K-State 44-28 in the paint, and they played 2 guys that are taller than 6'6" on their roster that play in their top 7 or 8 of the rotation. They made 53% of their twos, 61% of the second half from 2, and just really dominated. K-State made 3 or 4 from 3 in the second half, made some big threes when they needed them. But really, this was about teams that want to get to the paint and attack, and Wichita State was that team. The St. John's game was a little bit different, but similar. St. John's killed us on the offensive glass in that second half and had a bunch of second chance points. K-State wasn't awful on the boards, and actually they ended up being out-rebounded, even though they had 16 offensive rebounds in this game. But you aren't going to win on the road if you give up 50 points, and they did that twice now on their 2 true road games, giving up 53 and now 55 points in the second half. And you're not beating anybody with that. And obviously, a Wichita State team that is now ranked 107 in KenPom is not a world beater. So this is proof that you're not going to do it, and it's going to be a tough road in the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, this team lost 3-4 days ago in this same building by 10 points to Kansas City. And then they turn around and they win by almost 20 tonight against K-State. That's not necessarily anything that's going to give you a bunch of positivity moving forward if you're on the K-State side. And the points in the paint thing was apparent early in this game, where you think to yourself, man, how is this happening? And I understand that that's kind of Xavier Bell's game. I had some Wichita State fan come at me on Twitter about that. Like, have you ever watched Xavier Bell play? Well, number one, barely. I watched him play against K-State last year. I have no other reason to watch Wichita State ever. But secondly, that doesn't take away from the fact that that's a K-State thing, because Coleman Hawkins had a size advantage throughout the evening, at least for sure in the first half, and he never wanted to take advantage of it. And I understand that's not necessarily Hawkins' preferred style of game, but when you have that kind of advantage, you use it. Like, it's no different than being in the driveway when you're 9 years old and playing against your dad. Your dad has the size advantage, even if his entire life he was a guard in high school basketball. He knows that he has the size advantage on you, so he's going to use that to score inside. And Wichita State, they used it with some of their bigger guards, more physical guards, and they just attacked. And on the K-State side, they appeared to be scared of it, and that's why really Buddy Rich coming into the game provided that spark, because that was the one guy that wasn't scared to go inside in this game, and it helped K-State early on. And then there are some other things with Coleman Hawkins where I know he takes a lot of pride in being an unselfish player, and there are a lot of times where he makes the smart play and the smart decision. But he's gotten to the point where he's been so passive this year that it's a problem, and it's turning into, trying to be a good teammate is the wrong play and the dumb play. There were times tonight where he should have been more aggressive inside, where things opened up and for some reason he passed it. The overpassing continues to be a big problem on this team too.
Yeah, because it just magnifies because you really have no other distributor. Hawkins had 8 assists. Max Jones had 4, made a few nice passes, but it highlights the issues that K-State has with guard play. Doug McDaniels played 5 minutes tonight, 4 in the first half, got pulled, played one in the second half, got pulled. And he was the guy that was supposed to be the true point guard on this team and be the leader in that regards. And whatever's going on there is a mess. And then it's magnified because you just don't have any other guy that can do that. They rolled the dice with David Castillo tonight, and he goes 0 for 7 from 3, really struggles. And you just can't live with that. I appreciate them trying to change things up and putting him in the starting lineup. The last 2 games, he didn't play a whole lot versus Drake. He played quite a bit more tonight and just didn't produce. And it's tough business when you have to roll a freshman out there and ask him to do that. But you got no other options. And your other guards, C.J. Jones, Max Jones, combined for 15 points. They played okay, but you just don't have an answer. And then you just see decisions made, like Paul Mills rolled out both of his bigs most of the second half, and that was a big factor in what WSU was able to do inside and just dominate inside the paint. And even with Hawkins and David Gasson on the floor, 6'9" guys, K-State had no answer. And then, like you mentioned, their guards were just bigger, more aggressive, attack, get to the rim. And K-State just doesn't have that from the perimeter this year. And then when you have your big guys not really be able to do that as well, you're in a world of hurt against a team that's more aggressive. And Wichita State was that team tonight, and that's why they won so handily, I think.
Do you think K-State could have done a better job of getting David Gasson involved on the offensive end? Was his lack of production there due to Quincy Ballard just too tall, couldn't get much against him, or a lack of K-State even making an attempt?
I think it was a little bit of both. I mean, you saw the first play at a halftime. They ran a play, got Brandon Housen going downhill into the paint, tried to throw a lob to David Gasson, and they stole it. He jumped up and stole the ball. And they tried that a couple other times and just couldn't get it. And I didn't anticipate their big being that much of a factor, but he really was. He played really well, guarded, rebounded, scored around the paint. He came into the game shooting like 70% on twos and is really tough inside. And again, K-State just didn't, Wichita State was better on the perimeter and they were better inside. And it was, pretty apparent. That should not be the case against a middle of the pack AAC team.
Well, and I mean, middle of the pack is a nice way to put it. I mean, this team, they tied for last in their league last year. Like this is not a Wichita State team that is playing good basketball. That's the one thing here is I think Paul Mills is trying to do some good things at Wichita State. And I think you can see a direction moving forward that would be better for Wichita State than what they've been since, they had to fire Greg Marshall and Isaac Brown took over then. But it still isn't a good team. This is a team that has gotten blown out by Florida, DePaul, and one of the other ones that they played there in the middle of the stretch. I guess they lost by 10 against Kansas City. So they had those on there, and they haven't necessarily buried some of the really bad teams that they face, same like K-State. Like both of these teams should have felt pretty similar, and in the end you go, okay, you've got a team like K-State that plays this in the Big 12 and a team like Wichita State in the AAC. The Big 12 team should win this game, and they certainly shouldn't lose by 19 points. And that's the bigger issue with K-State right now is it's not even the losses, which are a massive problem. But I've done pick and preview with you for the St. John's and the Wichita State game. And both times after the game, my reaction is, and again, I picked K-State to lose in both of them. I thought they would lose, yet they somehow found a way to make it feel and look even worse than a loss to those teams would have felt. And it's inexcusable and unacceptable at this point that it keeps happening like this. And that's why, personally, the way I see it now, people should write this team off. This team is not going to get this thing on the right track. This is a lost season, and you think about the way that this season was built up into with portal heavy, rumored to be very NIL heavy. A lot of that is going to disappear moving forward, and this is the worst possible season for Jerome Tang to have this massive of a meltdown on his hands, because not only does it ruin this season, there's a good chance it ruins or at least severely hamstrings things the next season, and who knows how it goes after that. Like, this is going to take a total reconfiguration of how Jerome Tang thinks his basketball program should operate.
Yeah, and it becomes a mess because there's so much evidence that roster continuity is one of the big factors in building a winner and maintaining a winner. And you know, K State broke that mold in Tang's first year, and with the first year coach, that's going to be the case most of the time. And managed to win with Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson, among others. And then last year was a pretty much a rebuild year, and then this year is another rebuild year. And the issue is you lose so many guys that had eligibility left from last year's team that were pretty good. Guys like Cam Carter, Arthur Kaluma, even Colbert, even the freshman Dede Ames, R.J. Jones. You lose all these guys, and then you try to rebuild the roster, and you sell to the fan base the portal guys you brought in, and they were highly rated. And Evan Malkawa had one of the top 5 classes in the country, and among others, a bunch of people had him as one of the best portal classes in the country. And then you don't produce, and you've also preached to your fans and told your fans to expect to win, to expect parades in Manhattan, and you just can't afford to have that rhetoric and then do this. And then in the midst of all this, when we struggle, after last game, Coach Tang brought up the continuity on Drake's roster because they had played together so often, as why they were so good. I mean, there's a disconnect on how they're trying to build this team and then what they're doing with the building of this team. And next year, you know, 3 of your top 6 guys have 1 year left. 3 of your top 6 guys are gone. And then you're hoping that your few guys with 2 or 3 years left develop. And I don't know if you can trust in that. You know, Buddy Rich was the best one of that group of developmental guys.
Well, why would those guys want to stay too?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's the thing. I was thinking about it tonight when he was talking about David Castillo after the game. And look, I think David Castillo early on in this game, after, you know, the third missed 3, you just realize it's not going to be his night shooting. And if he's not making those, it's not worth having him out there. And Jerome Tang was talking about how, you know, you play these guys, that way they become sophomores and juniors that can contribute. And I totally get that. I understand that. I think you do have to try that. I also think he was right. Like, it was good that he did keep on shooting. I'm totally in that line of belief as well. But David Castillo should have been pulled from that game. And when I started thinking about that, though, it's like, why would Castillo want to come back to this next year? He was a highly thought of guy coming out of his recruiting class. Where's the upside for him next year? Buddy Rich, where is the upside for that guy? A guy who probably, if you had asked of the 3 freshmen last year, who was most likely to transfer, I think most K-State fans would have said it was Buddy Rich. And instead, it ended up being R.J. Jones and Dede Ames. And Buddy Rich, credit to him for sticking around and saying, no, I want to be here to get better. And he did that. He has a night like this tonight, which is impressive. And yes, he's hit and miss. He's very up and down. What he was tonight is not what he's going to be over the course of the entire season, but he's a player that didn't play the last handful of games. And why is he going to say, you know, it's not a guarantee that I'm going to get the minutes I want next year. I think I have the promise. Why would he stick around? Like, that's the other layer to all this. Is not only is it you're losing some of your top performers from this year, top performers in air quotes, but you also have a bunch of guys that, why would they want to come back next year? Are you going to want a guy like Doug McDaniel back? He's one of the guys that has eligibility remaining. So that's a question. The other thing too, and this plays the other side of the coin when you talk about Tang's comments with roster continuity and Drake and how he talked about them. Roster continuity is a big and very important thing in college basketball. And that seems to be what Jerome Tang was noting. But it's really hard for people to take that in when in year one you do what you did and go to the Elite Eight, like K-State did with only 2 players on the previous team. And to say that about Drake bothered me a little bit too, because yes, most of those guys had played together at Northwest Missouri State, but the head coach was jumping up from Division II, Division I. The players on the team, of the guys that play at least 15 minutes on the team, this is where they played last year. If you look at Bennett Sturts, not at Drake. Mascari, not at Drake. Abreu, not at Drake. Manyawu, he played at Wyoming last year. Tavion Banks, not at Drake. Nate Ferguson, the only guy on this team for Drake that played at Drake last season. And actually, this is his 5th year with the Bulldogs. That's the only piece of roster continuity that Drake had. Yes, some of these guys had played together, but they were doing it playing in the MIAA. They were facing Washburn last year. And now here they are putting it to K-State on a Tuesday night in Kansas City. And I just think this team is lost right now in finding the direction that they need to go in how to focus. I think they're so focused on a ton of things that don't actually pertain to how this team gets better. They're on the defensive right now. They're trying to throw off any attack that could come at them that is totally fair from people right now about how this team has performed. And I think they're too worried about that, and they're not focused on playing basketball, because I tweeted it at one point tonight because it stood out to me. And it's a little harsh, but I think it's well earned, because I can remember it like my 10th or 11th birthday party, my dad coming out and yelling at my friends and I to say, you guys can either keep playing your game, or you can and quit bitching, or you can be done and go inside. And tonight, K-State decided they would rather bitch throughout the entire game about missed calls and just let the defense keep letting guys blow by them. Meanwhile, Wichita State showed up and they said, hey, some things haven't gone our way. We haven't done well in these areas. Maybe some missed calls. They put their head down and they just fixed their problems and played basketball. Wichita State played basketball tonight, and all K-State wanted to do was focus on everything else. And that has been the number one issue for this team throughout the entire season. Because after the loss to Drake, it wasn't about losing that game. It wasn't about losing your 4th game of the season. It was comments that had been coming from social media. And the same culprits in the press conference, Jerome Tang and Coleman Hawkins, that brought that up, were the two guys that complained the most about officiating tonight. A lot of Curtis Kelly looks and arm throws from Coleman Hawkins. Jerome Tang was riding the officials all night long. And look, people know I'm not a big support the refs guy, and I'm not backing the boys in the stripes all that often. But there comes a point where you have to realize, what you're doing helpful to your team or a detriment? And tonight, a lot of guys were a detriment in what they decided to focus on in this game.
Yeah, and the outside noise and the fact that this team is paying so much attention to it, I think you're exactly right. It's a problem, and it's clear that they're doing it, because that was I didn't hear the press conferences tonight yet, but it was clear after the last game that was the focus, and it became the focus, and then it's probably still going to be the focus coming out of this one. But this is a team that you can count on to play 15, 20, maybe 25 minutes of pretty good basketball a night, where they're competitive and playing hard and playing together. But the other 15 to 20 minutes, they're just awful. I mean, it'd be one thing if the other 15 to 20 minutes they just played average or a little bit below average. But
which is how most basketball games go.
Yes.
No team plays 40 great minutes.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. But to be just terrible for 15 to 20 minutes is unacceptable, and part of the reason the fans turn away. I mean, there was one thing to watch those 20, 21, 22 teams under Bruce and how bad they were, but that was a talent issue and just a team that just didn't have anyone that was alphas that could play.
Yeah, and a guy in Bruce that had gotten to the point in his career, like most guys phase out of this. They get to a certain point where the game just isn't meant for them anymore, and that was Bruce Weber there. And Bruce took a lot more heat for it than he probably deserved, and a lot of that stems back to the two really bad years in years 3 and 4 at K-State. And certainly I have my issue with Bruce Weber for how he handled things walking out the door. But I think back and, that team, I can still remember watching that game at Texas Tech that season where they were begging for the foul call at the end of the game that they didn't end up getting. And people's, was a block, was it clean, whatever. But that's one of those where I still kept tuning in to watch that team every single night, even though they weren't a great basketball team. But they all went out there, they battled, they played hard, and it wasn't disastrous stretches that did them in. It wasn't 10 to 15 god-awful minutes. It was just they don't have enough in the tank to get over the hump and win these games. And that's the difference with this team is you see it. This team is way more talented than those teams that Bruce had. And yet for some reason they have those stretches where everybody turns away. And then you think about the way that this team has handled things when they get their chance to speak publicly. And it's not what fans want to hear. And I understand that you have to be protective of your team and your guys. I get that as a coach. So you can't go out there and every single press conference say, yeah, my guys suck. This guy did this wrong. Yeah, it was a mistake to give this guy this much NIL money. Totally understand that you can't do that every time, even though, fans would want that. But there comes a time where that needs to happen in a pretty strong way. I think at least once or twice, especially depending on how the team is built. And based on some of the characters on this team, this is the kind of team that needs a smack in the face as opposed to an arm around the shoulder. And Jerome Tang has not been willing to give that yet. And that was evidenced tonight by the fact that we did not get players post-game. No player came in and sat in front of the media tonight. And I'm not overly surprised by that, but it's a disappointing thing. And then the other thing that, again, this is little, it seems silly to matter, but Jerome Tang comes into the press conference. And again, the procedure typically is the road team goes first. Wichita State players came in. Paul Mills came in. We wait. Then Jerome Tang comes in. Jerome Tang strolls into the media room whistling. Just like, oh, it's all good. And it's one of those things where it doesn't matter, does it not? But it feels like there is a certain level of tone deafness to that when you come in. So those are some of the other concerns that play into this and why it just doesn't seem like this thing is salvageable. I think so many parts of this team are out of whack, and I don't know that any of them are going to have the drive to fix it. And I mean, why should they? That would be a way to look at it. But most competitors, I always say this, in the moment, you always think you can get something done. Most competitors think that. And it doesn't matter if you're playing Division I basketball or, you're a JV golfer that just made a snowman on the hole before. If you're a true competitor, you think you can turn it around the next time out and continue to improve everything. And this team, to me, doesn't come off as having that mentality.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, all the little things are magnified because of everything we talked about earlier, the rhetoric, the expectations, and what fans heard or what they thought they heard coming into this season. And K-State fans are not going to put up with that. I mean, K-State fans will not put up with poor effort, poor perceived effort, and when it looks like guys aren't trying. And then it's magnified because it's NIL, and K-State fans know whatever the dollar amount is, it was perceived by many national guys in the know, and you got and people around K-State in the know that it's at least top 5 in college basketball. And when you have like guys like Kevin Sweeney, national guy that has brought up this fact a couple times on Twitter when K-State has played poorly. He brought it up during the LSU game on Twitter. He brought it up after the Drake game on Twitter. I haven't seen anything tonight from him. But when those guys start kind of slamming K-State, not directly, but you know what they mean when they bring it up, it's just not a good look for the program. And I know that's probably not going to happen, but K-State fans want a coach to come out and say, I'm sorry, we're not getting it done. And there's no excuses, period. I think that's all they want to hear. And we haven't heard anything close to that right now. And it has the makings of being disastrous as this season goes along, because when you get into Big 12 play, it's certainly not getting any easier. And K-State's going to have a tough road to climb to even win, 3 or 4 games? I mean, right now that looks like the ceiling for this team in Big 12 play.
Yeah, and it doesn't totally take the heat off of your shoulders if you're Jerome Tang in this basketball team. If you come out and say, we all have collectively been terrible this year. We have screwed this up. We are not performing to the expectation that you guys have, and certainly we have. But if you say that, you get a little bit more grace, and you at least have the understanding of, okay, they're aware of this at least. And I think this team internally is aware that they're not doing what they should, or if they weren't aware of that, then they wouldn't be so combative at times about the way that they're treated or asked or whatever. But you know, you have to have that awareness, and Chris Kleiman for the most part typically does. Um, it wasn't a misspeak, but I knew what he meant by it. But I knew in the moment, the second he said it, it was not going to turn out well, and that was the "it's hard to win 8 games" comment after losing to Iowa State this year. That was a misstep by him, and I think he has been torched a little bit further than what he needed to be for that comment by fans. I think there's still a lot of ill will being held against him for that. He didn't mean that he's satisfied with 8 wins every season. He certainly understands that if he wins 8 games every year, he's not going to be the head coach at K-State in 5 years. If K-State plateaus and only wins 8 games every season for the next 5 years, I can guarantee you Chris Kleiman is not the head coach at K-State in 5 years. But he has also had plenty of moments where he's come out and apologized. And through the entire process, not once has Chris Kleiman said a bad thing about K-State fans or even felt like K-State fans have been challenged. And that's another area where people have really struggled this year and last year with Jerome Tang, is that he's not afraid to poke the bear and call out the fans in some way. And Tuesday night, was it directed at K-State fans or was it just people in general? It may have been more of that, but fans certainly take it that way when you have a track record of drawing them into it. And that makes things really tough moving forward. So I think having the awareness to come out and understand some of the problems, that helps you. But you're right. The national perception for K-State right now is bad. And if there's, if somebody had to win the award for laughing stock of college basketball every season, the last 2 years it was Louisville with Kenny Payne. And I was front seat. I loved watching the train wreck that was Louisville basketball the last couple of seasons. But without a doubt, it is K-State this year for those in the know. For the casual viewer, K-State being bad, it doesn't resonate with them. But I've seen Jeff Goodman have tweets. I've seen Kevin Sweeney have tweets. You've seen others that have recognized, because they understand and they know the game, what K-State had going into this season. And to those people, K-State is the laughing stock of college basketball right now. To me, K-State is the laughing stock of college basketball right now. And I have to also turn around and look in a mirror, because I'm the idiot that told everybody I thought this team was going to be good. I thought the Coleman Hawkins addition was great. I thought it was big that they got Doug McDaniel. I believed in this team. I believed in this staff. And I feel really silly and like I've got egg on my face for even believing in this team. And I'm not the one constructed it, and I'm not the one on the floor playing every single night. And I feel bad and I feel embarrassed by it. And that's part of what it is when you're a diehard. Look, I am here to try and present things and call it how I see it, whether it's, talking about Wichita State, who I have zero care for in the world, or K-State, who obviously I went to school there. I love K-State, have since I was born. I owe a lot of great things to K-State. I met my wife there, like all these things. I am still a diehard K-Stater, and K-State is a representation of me. And that's why so many people are hurt by this, is because K-State is representing a group of alums in a really poor way right now. And you become the laughing stock, and you have to be the one to wear it. And in addition to that, then you look at how this thing kind of plays out moving forward. Throughout this process, you've basically been told you're part of the problem in all of this, when K-State fans, as much as they would like, they don't have say in who's on this team, who plays the minutes, who does what. That's why Jerome Tang is getting paid to do this job. That's why these players are now getting paid to play this game, and it's not happening. And the other thing that I will tie into that, and this will be the last thing we can talk about, and I'll let you get your final thoughts in here, fan, is after the game, one of the things that Jerome Tang said in his press conference was, and when asked about continuing this series with Wichita State. We've gotten four years of it now after it being dead for basically 20 years. K-State goes 3-1. Look, as somebody that grew up in Hutchinson, Kansas, an hour away from Wichita, I knew enough Wichita State people. They were very arrogant. They were very cocky when, they had a spurt of a couple of good years. I love nothing more than K-State playing Wichita State and beating Wichita State. That I enjoy this matchup. I think this should continue because I've also been in the building in Intrust Bank Arena the first time that they played this thing again and thought this was an awesome crowd. This was a fun game. I've seen the games play out the last 2 years in Manhattan and Kansas City and then here tonight in Koch Arena, and I think this game should be played every year. And I think most of the fans would agree based on how I've seen the reaction from K-State fans, the attendance, and whatever else. Jerome Tang says after the game, it doesn't do anything for K-State moving forward. And to me, that is another tone-deaf statement from him after a game because it may not do anything for you, and you may not think it does anything for your team, but the reason why you're getting paid the money you are is because of the fans and because of the university. And if you can throw one bone to the fans and keep playing this game, you absolutely should. I think it should keep happening. I was disappointed to hear those comments because to me, that comes across as this thing is not going to get played anytime soon again. And it's a real disappointment because you play this game and you lose one time. It's a whole lot better to lose one game to Wichita State than it is to lose a game to Liberty and some crappy MTE that you scheduled this year. It's a lot better than losing a semi-home game to Drake, a team out of the Missouri Valley Conference that you have zero connection to. Play the in-state game and let your fans have fun, get their bragging rights when they win. And yeah, they got to take the crap when they lose, but it's fun. Everybody will look back on this series and say that they had fun if you're a K-State or Wichita State fan. And it's unfortunate that the people that are going to get to make these decisions don't seem to feel that way.
Yeah, I was around. I remember when, K-State ended the series around 2004. And K-State actually finished that series with 2 wins in the last 2 games that they played under Jim Woolridge. But he made basically the same comments that K-State doesn't get anything from it. It's not worth it. And I agree with you. I don't think that's true. I think the way they formatted this version was ideal with the 2 games. I mean, even though the one is in Wichita, the 2 sort of neutral site arenas and then the 2 campus arenas, I think that's the way to do it. But I think it also speaks to the difference in philosophy because again, this goes back to more respect for Bruce. Bruce understood the value of regional rivalries. He scheduled this series. He scheduled the series with Nebraska, which this staff has also indicated that they don't want to do because it's not worth it. And I think
they lost it.
And
Bruce didn't.
And I think you're right in the stance that I would rather play regional rivalries with a couple home games in a neutral site than I would just random opponents. And it's not like we're going out and bringing North Carolina and Duke and UConn to play home and homes. You're going to get a home and home with middle of pack ACC team, Georgia Tech or something like that. Maybe a Big East team only because we have to play them. So I agree with you. I don't think it's the right move, and I don't think it's worth it. I think it's worthwhile to still play this game because it's Wichita State still, even though they haven't been as good the last several years since Greg Marshall, they're still a decent program to play. And I get that it hurts to lose the game, but don't lose the game. It's all. I mean, we're the better program we should be this year, and we lost the game by 19 points. That's on us.
Yeah.
That's not on Wichita State.
Yeah, and of the non-Power 5 programs, Wichita State, even though they've been down for the most part the last 5 years plus, they still have more name notoriety than a lot of other non-Power 5 teams. And, think about in football, K-State goes 1-1 in the 2-game series with Missouri. It was fun to get to see K-State play Missouri again. Go back to Bruce, the COVID season. Drake and Colorado came to Bramlage for that Little Apple Classic, and that was fun to get to see Colorado again. It was fun to play Colorado again this year in football, even though, it's going to happen moving forward because they're conference mates now. And then look on the other side of it and think of how much K-State fans have put on Jamie Pollard for clearly not prioritizing Farmageddon. And I think you look at the K-State side of it and the Iowa State side of it, the fans all would like for that to continue to be played. And that's looking at the fact that over the last 7 seasons, K-State's only won 2 of those games against Iowa State. But if you gave me the option, I would say I would rather play Iowa State every single year in football than whatever other random Big 12 team you're going to throw on the schedule. And it's not there because it would appear that Jamie Pollard didn't prioritize it. And you're absolutely right, because then, think about some of the other games that you're going to be dealt. And Jerome Tang seemed to make it clear as well, like he's happy the Big 12 Big East thing is expiring. They don't think that does anything for him either because of how you play this, whatever. But there are very few power conference teams that you can bring in non-conference play that play anywhere that I think that does anything for you in terms of, number one, your fan base and the support and the way that they view it. But then also, like, okay, sure, it's another possible win, but you don't really need those in non-conference play. Non-conference should be about the team getting better and also find your pockets to have some fun for your fans. And this is a major whiff if this thing does not continue, and it will totally be on K-State for this one, because I was pretty defensive as a mouthy and know-it-all middle schooler and high schooler to those, same annoying Wichita State fans that drive me so hard to hate them. That this is a two-way street in getting this thing scheduled. I think for the longest time, it was a big, I'm going to dodge. Now I'm going to dodge if you were Bruce Weber and Greg Marshall. They knew what their teams looked like going into certain seasons. And when one had the upper hand, they were ready to do it. And when the other was a little down, they were like, I don't know, let's kick this can down the road, until they both finally got to a point where it was kind of a hard reset for their programs. And they were like, we need some energy here. Greg Marshall had gone back-to-back seasons where Wichita State wasn't in the tournament, and they were middle of the pack in the AAC since they had taken over, and they needed something to reinvigorate Wichita State basketball a little. Bruce needed that because he had just put together the worst season imaginable coming off of a Big 12 title, and they both decided this is best for our programs, and they got it on the schedule. K-State comes out the better for it, going 3-1 during this stretch. But it certainly hurts to lose the last one, and it's just another kick in the face for this team this season that certainly can't weather much more, or I think we're going to get even worse performances down the stretch. But that's enough for me tonight. I'll give you your final licks here, and then we can get out of here.
Yeah, it's like I said at the beginning, disappointing non-conference. You finish it 0-2 against Drake and Wichita State. And I think, after the St. John's game, my mentality was, well, you go and you win these 2 games. They're not going to be great wins, but they're going to be quality wins, and gives you some momentum going into Big 12 play. Maybe you fix some of your issues, like we said, with who's playing, who's on the roster, what's going on. And it just looks like those issues got worse. And, now you're basically sending your team off for 3 or 4 days, and who knows what happens.
More than that, they will resume practice on the 26th, according to Jerome Tang. Okay. So that's 4 days where they will not be with the team.
Which I think, most years, if you're going into the break on a high, I think that's a good thing. I do like that they try to give those guys that break, but for this team, they need to get together as much as possible, and this is probably coming at a bad time, losing 3 in a row, and going into Big 12 play against a Cincinnati team that's pretty good, and then after that you have 2 road games that should be road games that are more winnable, for the team, and it's just sad because this probably won't be the worst season I've seen in K-State basketball since I've been a fan, but it's going to be probably the least meeting of expectations. I was thinking of what other team I've ever seen at K-State that was on this level. It's probably 2004 football. that started ranked in the top 15 and then got drilled by Fresno State and ended up losing to KU for the first time in a decade and going 4-7 and completely underperforming compared to where they started the season. I think that's the level of this team. And I can't think of another K-State basketball team that's been close. And that's frustrating to be in that situation.
Yeah, that's the thing. Unless this is some drastic turnaround in Big 12 play, this is going to be the most disappointing and categorized as the worst K-State basketball team of certainly my lifetime. Like, you can think back and you can think of, like, okay, obviously I know one man that was not a fan of Tan Tom. He's right here right now. But and then Jim Wooldridge, obviously. But, like, you think of, like you were saying, where the expectations were for those teams. And, I think the Wooldridge teams, and correct me if I was wrong, because, my last year on this earth that Jim Wooldridge was a coach, I was 8 years old. But I like those teams didn't feel like they showed up some nights, and the criticism was they didn't bring it, they didn't try. And I don't like, was Jim Wooldridge a guy that really stirred up the fan base by some of his comments, like the way things have gone this year? Like, and then you think about the others. Obviously, Huggins came in that one year, was great for building K-State basketball. Frank comes in, boom, they go to the tournament, they get a win. Disappointing that they didn't make the tournament in 09, even since, the resume was probably better in 09 and 07 than it was in 08 to make a tournament. But you kind of get it because you lose Michael Beasley and Bill Walker, and then boom, tournament. You win the Big 12, Bruce Weber's first year. You go to the tournament. Yeah, those 2 years sucked, but in the moment and looking back on it, you just go, these are bad seasons, and obviously nobody liked them, but it doesn't feel like this feels. Like, this feels absolutely hopeless, and like it's going to be a cause for greater problems down the stretch. And maybe it felt like that at the time, year two of things going wrong with Bruce. Well, really, it was only 2 years that went wrong. And the second year, you saw the light at the end of the tunnel because you had Wessa Wundu, you had Dean Barry and Cam all have promising moments as freshmen. Like, there were things there. So that's why when we talk about all this, that's why this team gets thrown in that category. And it's wildly disappointing and surprising in some ways that it's turned out this way this season. But K-State seems lost. I don't know that the answers are going to be found. And you hope that something shifts in Big 12 play and something crazy happens. It's like the scene in The Incredibles where the kid's riding by on his trike and Mr. Incredible's getting out of the car and he's kind of looking around and like, what are you waiting for? And the kid's like, I don't know, something amazing to happen. That's kind of K-State fans right now, where why should you expect something, but you're sitting around kind of hoping that it happens. But it seems highly unlikely. And now this is one of those things where it's more about thinking, if you're on the K-State side of things, how do things get better and turn around next year? Because you can't miss the tournament for a third straight season. Because then that would put you in a boat where you've missed the NCAA tournament, if you're K-State, 6 of the last 7 years. And that is not a very good stretch. That does not feel very good. And that drives you closer to being kind of pushed towards the bottom of this Big 12 than being elevated to the top, where it's obviously already going to be tough when you have Kansas and Arizona, who are two, no matter who's there, what conference they're in, perennial powers in college basketball. And then Houston, as long as Kelvin Sampson's there, is going to be towards the top. Scott Drew is going to continue to get top-tier players. And you can look at Iowa State. I mean, Iowa State is going to win the Big 12 this year. They are, to me, far and away the best team in the league. They are a Final Four caliber team this year, and it is no joke. And it pains me to say that because I'm like the rest of you. I'm not a big TJ Otzelberger guy, but they scare the crap out of me this year. And K-State is just so far away from any of those teams, which is disappointing because after the first year, and even after last year, I still believe that Jerome Tang had K-State in a position to be there. It just doesn't seem like that's the case. And it's really disappointing, too, because I like Jerome Tang, the guy. He says and does a lot of things that I like and make me think that he could still be the right coach for K-State. But the results the last 2 seasons now and the way that things have been handled when things have not gone wrong are really starting to lead me towards the other side. And that is the toughest thing to kind of conquer head on if you're a K-State fan right now.
Yeah, it's tough. This is on track to be, besides COVID, the first team to rank outside the top 100 in Ken Palm since 2002. So if that happens, if K-State does finish outside the top 100 in Ken Palm, which they will if they only win 3 or 4 Big 12 games, then and I agree with you. I like Jerome Tang a lot. I've even most this season have felt like he can get out of this, but it becomes the point where how easy will it to be to do that, especially when you're going to probably have to rebuild a roster again and not have the funds you had last year to do that. So I don't want to completely fall off the cliff, but it's tenuous right now for this program.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Before we get out of here, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, fan, as we are a handful of days away from that. I hope that you are giving the gift of Ireland this holiday season. If you're not, shame on you, and a disappointing Christmas for your family. But there's still time because you can secure your tickets now through travel and hospitality packages as the Wildcats kick off the 2025 season in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic in Dublin, Ireland. Visit cats2ireland.com for more information. That's cats, the number 2, Ireland.com. And everybody should go because it doesn't matter how or where. It's a good thing that 2 rivals are playing each other in K-State and Iowa State. So it doesn't matter if it's Ireland. It doesn't matter if it's KU in Africa. And it doesn't matter, apparently, if it's Wichita State made up in your mind the next couple of seasons arguing with your Wichita State friends. As long as the rivalries are getting played, it is good for K-State, and it's good for the game itself. We will get out of here. We'll have more content throughout the week. Drew and I owe everybody a load of recruiting updates on Monday because K-State is just getting commit in the transfer portal right now, and including, depending on when you see this one, you're probably going to have another one that's due. So we will do all of that on Monday, and then DY and I will start preparing for the Rate Bowl come right around Christmas. So for KSU_fan, I'm Mason Voth. Thank you for watching and listening to the KSO show, and try to sleep this one off, Cats fans.